Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us wherever you are listening to us from, whatever device you're listening to us on, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As always, thank you so much for the support, and keep those kind, positive messages coming, and keep on sharing the podcast. I really appreciate it. So today's topic is one that every year as coaches, we kind of face to some varying degree, because every year as coaches, we have to adjust to having new players and players taking on different roles and perhaps more responsibilities. And we never have the same team 2 years in a row. And as we know, sometimes our team looks very different once some of our key players graduate or move on. So today we're going to talk about rebuilding a team after you lose key players. If you're in this position now, hopefully me and my guests can give you some ideas. And if you're not in this position, tuck this episode in your memory bank somewhere for when you do inevitably come and face this situation. So my guest to discuss this topic is the head girls basketball coach at North Point Prep in the great state of Arizona, Coach Sammy Rivera. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well, Coach. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Really looking forward to this one because it's one that applies to everyone. We're all going to be in this situation, and I know some coaches may have been in that situation before, and maybe get them some ideas for the future. So, Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey. Where's the game taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you? And what road led you to North Point?
Yeah, so I actually started applying for positions last summer. I got my start in high school basketball last summer. Started applying in late April, early May. And after things didn't really work out at a couple places, I got the job at North Point Prep as an assistant coach on the varsity program. And, since then have just kind of worked my way up. I was approached towards the end of the season about taking over the program once the season did end. And of course I said yes. And so it's really, North Point has just, it's been a really great campus, really great school to be a part of. And I really enjoy being a part of the community. But, I went to high school here in the Valley. I graduated from Borgate Catholic High School. I played basketball there for 3 years, had to sit out my senior year because of an injury to my shoulder, but played 3 sports there: football, basketball, baseball. But basketball has always just been a sport that I really, really enjoy and just love. And outside of that, my grandfather, he was actually an official for the AIA here, and he actually went on to officiate some college football and college baseball. And so he just really gave me a love and a passion for sports.
No, that's awesome, and I really like hearing about multi-sport athletes and being really active, really involved, and then as you kind of mentioned about how you kind of rose up a little bit your position that you're at in North Point. And so I actually want to touch on that really quickly. What was that kind of like last year, kind of going through that situation of not only you kind of getting the job and I believe it was towards the end of the season and then becoming the head coach, but just sort of navigating through, everything that was 2020 last year. What did you kind of learn and take from that?
Yeah. Last year it was just, I think everyone went through something similar, but also different at the same time. No one's season was exactly the same. And for us, at North Point, we weren't able to really get going until late November, early December, kind of when things were still in question. And something that I really just learned was so important is just the preparation that goes into a season. We didn't really have too much of a summer, and that really just you could tell. Once you get the full team together, it is noticeable. And so just getting the team back to running at full speed as quick as possible, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, I know how happy I've been as a coach to have a summer and to work with players. I'm sure so many coaches are so thankful that for a lot of areas they can do stuff this summer because yeah, as you mentioned, you really do notice it. Or if you watched some games last year, especially at the beginning of the year, oh man, you could tell some programs missed the summer for sure. So uh yeah, no, that's a great point that you bring up. And before we get into our topic, something else that I know about you is that you work in media a bit. You do work through some sports journalism, some other work that you do within sports media. So I'm curious about how does seeing sports kind of through that lens from like the media side of things, how has that kind of helped you or give you like different perspectives as a coach?
That's it's kind of tough to say. Not too much, I guess, would say helps like on the court, like with X's and O's and that sort of stuff. But I would even say that it's almost kind of the opposite. That my background as an athlete and as a coach, really helps me as a journalist when it comes to developing questions or really things like that. But even on the other side of that, sports journalism is such a big field. Even for me myself, I'm not necessarily interested, in being too much of a reporter, things like that. But never say never. But for me, what I'm really interested in is, live sports production. Whether it's camera operating, running graphics, directing, and things like that. It really enjoy doing that, and so something that I guess I think about is, making sure that the players get, as much exposure as possible and making sure that they get the film that they need and, things like that, which I'm sure a lot of coaches also think about regardless of whether or not they're involved with sports journalism. But, I would say it's things outside of the game, like bringing things like, live streaming, being able to bring that to whatever high school that I'm coaching at, and uh, that's more so for the athletes and their families and stuff like that. So I would say it more helps me outside of coaching, more or less.
Yeah, I could imagine that, you kind of see things in your coaching world and what you see, as you kind of go day to day coaching, and then you think of almost ways that you can kind of like bring that into the work that you kind of do within like the sports production and media production like that. You're like, oh, this would be like really good to do, or like you mentioned about like game film or things like that. So I'm sure that's something that your players appreciated. I know that, my players love like things that are filmed, or when games are kind of like live casted and stuff like that, so I'm sure players really enjoy that as well. Awesome. So our topic, like I said, we're going to talk about the idea of kind of the rebuild, especially after you lose like key players. So let's just kind of talk about your experience with that, about what are some experiences that you've kind of gone through where you kind of had to lose, or you did lose key players, and were kind of in a position where you kind of had to build up new players to kind of fill in and step up.
Right. So, even just for us this last season, we had two seniors on the team this last year, and both made, huge impacts on the team. But one of which was, our starting point guard who had been on the varsity team for the last 4 years. And so filling her spot is something that we're really focusing on. But I think, really a huge part of getting new players, especially younger players, ready for that spot is to get them with, the varsity team if they're coming up from the JV or the freshman team, or, just getting them up to with whichever team that they're going to be playing with next year, getting them together as a group as soon as possible, and really allowing the younger players to have more of a role in leading things, especially during the summer. I think it just can go a long way for their confidence. And I know for me myself, just as an athlete, I've been a part of some teams that were relatively young, and I know what the coaches did for us that went a long way for my confidence was just sitting down and having conversations, realistic conversations of what their expectations were. And I think doing that with your younger players can really help with their confidence.
It sounds like one of the things that coaches should be really mindful of is that players, especially those younger players who have to step up, might be really like self-conscious about the fact that, oh, I'm taking, this person's spot who, maybe scored like 20 points a game or they did all these things. And now I have to be like exactly how they were. And it sounds like it's really important to, as you mentioned, kind of like have like a conversation with the player and just like let them know like what you need from them, because I'm sure, as you can probably speak on that, players might get really nervous or think that there's like certain expectations for them, or certain pressure that's being placed on them.
Right, exactly. And I think, even just down at the high school level especially, a lot of the game is really just about confidence and making sure that the players are confident enough to go out there and make the plays that they are capable of making. And leaving room for error, exactly. Like just being realistic with them, they may not be able to go out and score those 20 points a game like that senior that you had, who just graduated, but they may be able to do different things and play a bigger role in other parts of the game.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea of just accentuating whatever that player's strengths are, and what it is that they're good at. And so you kind of mentioned about like conversations that you kind of talked about with, when you were playing as well. So I'm just kind of curious a little bit more about, what are those like conversations like? Are they just kind of like confidence builders? They kind of like boosting players up and just kind of getting them like mentally right? What are those conversations like?
I think it's more so just, you know, letting a player like for me, the conversation I had, and these were with, my baseball coach, Greg Hankey, rest his soul. He he would sit us down preseason whenever, regardless of if you were on the team last year or if you were a new player coming up to the varsity team. He would sit down with you with the coaching staff and just let not even necessarily, we're expecting so an X amount of hits or X amount of home runs, just letting you know that, there's a starting spot for you if you are, willing to step up and fill the role. It's there, it's yours, but you need to work hard. And so I think, they're not necessarily too much of, pep talks or really things like that, but I think just being on the same page with the player, that goes a really long way.
And one of the things I picked up on your answer is that when those conversations were taking place, they weren't focused like on a tangible number or like a certain outcome, but more of like the process of what they're expected to do. And that way, that conversation isn't tied into like, my expectation is you better get X amount of, hits or X amount of
Right.
points in a basketball situation. It's more like, here is like the process of what you're doing. And then, the outcome is just going to kind of be where it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think that probably does take pressure off of players when they don't have to necessarily focus on like reaching numbers or reaching totals. It's just like go and execute and go and do this, and we're gonna be all right. And I think maybe in turn that just kind of leads to greater levels of confidence when they know that they're not expected to, like we said, like score 20 points a game. It's like, no, like stick to what it is that you're good at as well. For sure. One of the things too that I think seems to be really important to make that happen for younger players to kind of like ready to step up is kind of the culture that your team has, and kind of the program culture. So just kind of want to talk about in your experience, either as a player or as you're entering this position now at North Point, about the culture that needs to be created to keep players from feeling like overwhelmed or feel like the moment is too big for them when they got to, step in somebody else's shoes.
Right. So, kind of like we've talked about those conversations and just being, realistic with them, but also, leaving room for those mistakes, um, you know, because it's it's not always, you're going to put them in, they're going to do everything right. A lot of the time it's learning through trial and error, and so making sure that, um, especially, you know, in the summer, like we said, it's so important to get them minutes now. You know, I noticed out with Gilbert basketball, the girls team out there, Coach Walker, he had I think five, maybe eighth graders or who whatever their age group were. He had them, you know, finish out the final 2 minutes of a basketball game this summer. And I think giving them minutes like that just goes such a long way for getting them ready for those moments. And as you said, a lot of the time they can feel overwhelmed. And I think, you know, kind of like we've talked about with preparation, you know, just getting the practicing being in those moments and getting them ready for that is really the biggest thing.
And summer seems like a perfect opportunity because the players are still competing, the players still want to win, but at the end of the day, like it's just summer. So, you know, put them
Exactly.
in those situations and oh, like if it goes well, great. If it doesn't, well, okay, it's summer. So it is what it is. And that just kind of builds a lot of, you know, hopefully confidence once they've kind of been through the situation to be okay with when that situation kind of happens in the season. And that's kind of crazy, that the story that you mentioned though about having, you know, a lot of young players like that over at Gilbert and just kind of putting them in there and just seeing what happens, but it does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Getting them as many minutes as possible, playing at whatever level that they're going to be playing at. I think it really goes a long way for their development. And as we've talked about, I think confidence is such a huge part of the game down at the high school level.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned, one of the things that as a coach you kind of have to be okay with is kind of like leaving room like for mistakes and for mistakes to take place. So in terms of your own like coaching philosophy, and I know there's so many different answers for this, but as a coach, if you're in that situation where you're trying to, you know, replace players and there's new players kind of stepping up and they are kind of like making mistakes, as a coach, what do you think are mistakes that, you know, you're okay with versus like ones that are almost like those non-negotiable, like we can't have like this mistake happen?
Right. So I think, you know, one of the biggest things, you know, is obviously you never want to see one of your players miss a defensive assignment. Um, Really, I think those are just drive coaches crazy. But you know, missing things like or mistakes like, you know, missing a shot, but if it's the right shot, you know, if it was the open shot, we got the look that we wanted, it just didn't go in. Those are things that you can live with. But you know, things where you've gone over it with a player, you know, a certain number of times, and they just keep falling asleep, whether it's on offense, on a press break, or on defense. You know, in any part of the game. I think those are the biggest things. Are just when you know when your players should be locked in, and most of the time that's on defense. At least for me personally, I stress more about defense than I do offense for the girls, and um, I think for me, a blown defensive coverage is kind of what will drive me crazy. But
Hmm.
it's more so if, you know, exactly like I said, you know, kind of they just completely fell asleep. You know, if they're kind of in the right spot, kind of doing what they're supposed to do, you can live with it. Because a lot of it is, like we said, just you have to be in that spot before to know what to do.
Yeah, defense definitely seems like one of those things that younger players or players who have to fill in, like they can quickly kind of catch up to what they need to do, at least especially in terms of like where they need to be and you know, just giving effort. I think in general, you know, there's no excuse to not be giving effort for sure. um as a coach, do you feel like as you're trying to like rebuild and put in new players, do you feel any sort of need to kind of like revamp things in your offense? Are there certain things that you would expect to stay the same because maybe in theory your players are working through the same offense from their JV team to the varsity team? I'm just curious about your philosophy on sort of the offensive execution and what that would look like as you try to fit in new players.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of different for each program. It obviously depends on who's returning, and whether or not the system that you have in place works with the players that are filling those spots. But for us, you know, this year at North Point, we're actually looking to change a big portion of our offense, and just kind of how we operate. And so, for us, we're going to be running a lot more, off ball action. I won't get into it too much, but, you know, just it'll be different for us this summer because a lot of it is to, some of the players that we have coming out, sometimes, and I'm sure other coaches experience this too. Sometimes it's a player's, first year ever playing basketball, have never picked up a basketball in their life before. And so I think just making sure that you progress at a pace that everyone can understand. And so that's the thing that we're focusing on the most, this next year, is just not being in too much of a rush to make things perfect, on the offensive end, more so just so that way everyone can get the right idea of what we're trying to do. So that way, for the next season, we're clicking and running like a well-oiled machine.
Well, I think something like that could, in a way, if you have like younger players or a lot of like newer players stepping in, if you're doing like a revamp or if you are changing some of the things that you're doing on the offensive end, then almost in a way that might like take some pressure off of those players because they feel like they don't feel like they have to like execute the, I guess, like the old way like absolutely
Right.
perfectly, and they can have something new. And it's almost in a way, and you can speak to this, it's almost like theirs now. It's like this new offensive philosophy that we have, like this is ours and this is something unique to like me and my team, and the other team didn't do that sort of thing.
Right, exactly. And what the style of play that we're really trying to bring is just, playing fast and, just getting out, running in space, running in transition. And that's a fun style of basketball to play, in my opinion. I always enjoyed playing that way. And I think it offers a lot of opportunity for players to go out and to score and to, really just, go out and play. And so that's, exactly like you said, kind of showing them that, this is new, this is something that, exactly, like kind of as you said, this is ours, this is a new age, however you want to call it, a new era of North Point basketball.
Yeah, and I'll just ask. I don't want to put you on the spot or anything like that, but are those conversations that like you've kind of had with your players about like the things that are going to be like a little bit different, a little bit new that you're going to do next year? Have you been able to like talk to them about that or try and get them excited about that new style of play at all?
Not too much, towards the end of the season. So I actually took over, as the head coach for the last 3 games of the regular season. And, in those 3 games, I had, I believe it was just one practice, where I was able to run things. And I'll be entirely honest, that was one of the worst practices I've ever ran. Just trying to do way too much, way too fast. But, um, I think they also have seen, just throughout the course of last season, they have taken notice, to the different style of play that I like to play, and especially that I'm trying to bring. But I haven't had too many conversations with anyone. I have had some individual conversations with some players, but, nothing as a full group, as a team.
hmm let me ask you, as just on a coach, on kind of like a almost like a personal level, as a coach, what do you feel like you either have done or are going to need to do to sort of I guess kind of like ease into this transition period? Because I imagine you as a coach, you probably have like a lot of ideas. You're putting these new players in, you're replacing old players, you're stepping up, and there's this uh, almost desire, I feel like, sometimes to try and do a lot and try and really hit the gas and accelerate and get things
Mhm.
right where you need to get them to. So as a coach, how do you kind of, or how do you plan on sort of trying to keep things in perspective where you're not trying to, I guess, run before you walk, if that sort of makes sense, and keep yourself in check?
Right. Yeah. And for me, just personally, just I've said this a lot, but just, being honest with myself and just realizing that, this is my first head coaching. opportunity. And so, you know, leaving room for myself to make mistakes, but also making sure that I learn from those mistakes and get better from it. Um, and so that I think is a big thing for me, and just looking at it, big picture, um, not trying to accomplish, obviously you want to uh, have a successful season and do well. But I think the way, for me, the way I'm trying to, measure success for how we do next year is just be more competitive in games. And the way I kind of measure that, and it's not perfect, but how many games finished within single digits or within 10 points. Um, and that's my goal, is to be more competitive, not have as many 20, 30 point losses. Um, and, exactly. So I think trying to, um, like we said, not trying to accomplish too much, and just almost like taking baby steps, we'll get there. And especially because we have such a young team, we had two seniors last year. We're only expecting to have one or two this next year. So we have a really young core to the team. And we're anticipating to add anywhere from, two to maybe even six, eight players coming up from either the junior high or just opted out of not playing last season.
Mm.
So for me, it's just realizing that we have a young core to the team, and that the future can be a lot, can be very, very successful.
So I think one of the things about the situation that you're kind of entering in, which is unique, but also is, I feel like, a positive, and I'll let you elaborate on it, is that you are replacing key players, but it's not as if in your situation your team was competing for like a state championship and then like you're really hitting like the rebuild. It sounds like you're replacing players, but it's not like there's daunting expectations of, you're going to go all the way and you better be hanging up banners in the gym sort of thing.
Exactly. And, I think every coach going into a new season, everyone is hoping for, at least postseason. Everyone wants to make playoffs at least. Um, that's at least what I assume is just about everyone's goal. But um, exactly. We were close to it last year. We were only going into the final game of the year. We were, I think, ranked 26th in 2A, and the top 24 went into the play-ins. And so we were close. We were right there. Couldn't handle business, and that's another thing that I've kind of stressed to the girls is, making sure you take care of those games early in the regular season, so that way at the end you're not, banking on winning the final game of the year just to get into the postseason. Um,
Yeah,
and
the win in November still has the same amount of weight in a sense as the one in January. They both matter.
yep.
Yeah, and not putting that sort of pressure. And then it seems then I'll follow up with that that might be s- that's going to be something maybe as a coach that you almost have to balance with having new players, and also kind of thinking in the back of your mind how important it is to try and like get out to the best start that you possibly can. So it seems like maybe that's like a balance that you're gonna kind of try and strike, to realize like, okay, we're doing new things, but also these early games are pretty important. We don't want to just give them away too.
Right. And that's also, preseason again is just so important. We talk
Yeah.
about the summer and how important it is, but making sure you get started, in those months leading up to the season. And again, as we said earlier, just getting back to moving at full speed as quick as possible, while avoiding injury, of course.
Hmm.
And I a big thing too is just, always once you get to that full speed, bringing that intensity every single day in practice, so that way when you get to that first game, you're already there in that mindset. And so I know for us, if we can, as many preseason, tournaments or leagues that we can get into this summer. That's what we're trying to do. And I think that just those minutes and those preseason, whether it be workouts or whatever, as a full team, running at full speed with that game time in season mentality is what's extremely important.
Yeah. I really like the idea of, if you can get your players together, get them working together, get them competing together, just kind of gelling together, and as quickly as you can kind of build that'd be super, super helpful. And along with that, is that a point of emphasis of yours that you feel like you might have with this group that you have coming up, where you want to make sure that they're kind of together and cohesive and acting as one? Have there been situations you've been in where, players had to kind of step up, but they didn't really know some of the other people that were going to be their teammates, and they kind of had to work through that? What has your experience been, and kind of like what are your hopes in terms of building the team togetherness with your girls?
Yeah, and I really think just getting them together as a group as soon as possible. It just, as you said, making sure that they gel, and just, once you have a team that believes in each other and trusts each other, that's, half the battle. And I haven't necessarily had any experiences at the high school level with that, where, the players weren't too familiar with each other. Um, but even, just this past season in the spring, I was the head coach for the junior high team at North Point, and a lot of the girls, didn't necessarily know each other, especially with COVID and things being online, and
Yeah,
with
sure.
remote learning. Um, the basketball was really, some of these girls, the only interaction that they had with each other. And you could tell that, from the beginning of the season, where we were as a group and as a team was entirely different than the team we were at the end of the season. I think that they really bonded and really came together by that final game.
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned about, just traversing through, especially everything over the past year, as well as trying to kind of go through the waters to build that team togetherness. It's a challenge, but when you get it, especially now that things are more opened up and you can do some stuff in person, hopefully that helps. And just as a follow up of that, then, are you of the philosophy then that you're, in terms of practicing, do you have everyone sort of practice together? Is everyone sort of like working together, kind of getting to know each other that way, or are things kind of like separated a little bit? What's kind of like your stance on how like varsity practices versus like maybe like a JV or a younger team would?
Um, well, I would say that, you know, uh, for the most part, working together as a team. Um, but we do have times where we split off into different groups. Uh, but really, you know, and it'll be a lot different than how we operated last year. We operated almost exclusively, as a team during practices. And we didn't have too much individual, work between the guards and the forwards and the bigs. And so that's something that we're trying to work on more this next season, is more group work in terms of position, and just really trying to work on specific skills for those areas.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear kind of like the different philosophies, but I feel like there's a huge benefit if you at least have some time where kind of everybody is working together, because you never know when somebody's going to have to kind of like step up, and if they're not familiar with the other players on the court or they don't feel that connected with them, I feel like, and you can probably speak to it, like that really shows on the court if somebody is almost like the odd person out, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, and it does show once you get them out on the court, right?
Yeah.
If it's someone who doesn't really feel comfortable out there, um, they end up looking like a deer in the headlights, and so that's what you want to try to avoid. And that's something that we kind of went through, down at the junior high level, and that fortunately a lot of the high school players know each other, and it's a really good group that we have, very welcoming, and so it's really not too much of an issue for these girls, getting along or anything like that. So really just for us, it's just about, getting them all together and yeah, working this summer.
Talk about returning players. The expectations that, or the new roles that returning players might need to take in as new players have to step up.
Yeah. So changing those expectations, I would say, exactly, like we're expecting those two younger players to be take more of a role when it comes to leadership on the team. But I think also realizing that, people lead in different ways. Um, it's not always about, who's the loudest in practice. Although one of ours is, people do sometimes, they just lead by how hard they go in practice, or by the mentality that they bring every day. So I think for us, it's just leaving the door open for, every player to show that they can be a leader, and not closing it off to, like, I've been saying that we're expecting those two freshmen to, be leaders, but, even the senior that we have, she's going to be a big leader, playing a big role for us this next season, so we're really just trying to leave the door open. And a big part of this too is, we're trying to bring, a new level of competitiveness to North Point. And I think through that competition, the leaders will show, when you challenge them, I think that they will rise up.
Right, kind of the, putting the pressure on, and see who's ready to step up, and who's ready
Right.
to kind of like make that next jump. And then kind of with that, the it's almost like I'm not gonna say like the culture's necessarily changed, but it does feel in a way like that is something that, we talk about replacing key players, but it almost sounds like you're also like replacing culture as well, or changing culture in a way where these players who may have to step up and have new roles, not only are they, kind of doing a new offense, like you said, but they're also entering like a new type of program that you're trying to build. Is that kind of the sense that I'm getting? Am I kind of right in that?
Yes, yeah, you are. And right, exactly. I think just about every coach, once they get their own program, right, they want to, depending on the program, right, and it's different for every case. Sometimes it's, a coach who's been with the program for years and years and is now taking over as the head coach. And, for me, I was a part of the team last year, but, that was my only, I didn't know North Point prior to last year. And, so I am trying to change the culture and, kind of change the overall, mindset that we have right now, just with the program and with the team. Um, and so I think it also it I know that, a few of the players, they're really excited to get back in the gym, to get back to work. And um, I think part of that, as you said, is because it's a new culture, a new style, new way of playing. I think it's exciting, and I think I showed the players, my passion for the game and my love for basketball last season, and so I think they're just really excited to get back out. I can see it from them.
And another thing that I think is kind of cool, and I don't know if this is your intention. I don't know if this is what you were trying to do, but in a way, when you step into that head coaching position, and you're thinking about players that you need to replace, as you're starting to put in like a new culture, I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like everyone is potentially replaceable. Like everybody is, like we're kind of all starting new, and like nothing is necessarily safe, or no one is necessarily safe in a sense, because you need to see who is going to step up to that new level that like you're setting. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. But that's kind of the sense I get out of it. It's like anyone's replaceable in a sense if they're not meeting those expectations in a way.
Exactly, right. And that's the end goal, is to have them realize that, it doesn't matter if, you started every single game that we played last year. If someone's willing to show up to practice every day and work harder than you, um, that spot might be theirs. And again, just really trying to bring out the best competition. And I think that a lot of these girls, and really, just high school athletes in general, when you do challenge them, um, they do get better and they do rise up to the occasion. And you know, I think that the girls are excited to have that level of competition.
Yeah.
um it's fun. It's a different kind of feeling, knowing that you have to show up and bring it every single day because someone might be trying to take your job that day, so um that's yeah, you are right about that.
Yeah, that's always I think that's always a shock for new cultures that get put in when that level of like, hey, here's how things are going to be run now, and like you're going to have to step up, and sometimes people have to learn that the hard way. And but usually the good thing is once that gets established, the tone is pretty clear, even if a couple people have to, like I said, kind of learn it by sitting on the bench when they thought they were going to be playing. But that's all part of the fun part. And with your position, actually, it brings me a unique opportunity to kind of ask you a unique question, because we're talking about replacing new players. You stepping in as a new coach in a sense are also kind of a
Mhm.
replacement. You're stepping in and filling in and stepping in this new role. You said you coached a few games at the end of last season, but for you personally as a coach and your growth as a coach, what sort of I guess expectations are you placing on yourself as you try to replace and step in and fill into this new role?
It's tough, and it's honestly um, not really something I've had too much time to really think about and put honest detail um, into thinking of goals. But uh, kind of like I said earlier, is just being more competitive in games. And as I said, that mark of finishing within that 10-point margin. And
Hmm.
it's not perfect. Some games you're close, you're right there the whole way, and then the last minute or two it gets away from you,
I've been there.
or or vice versa. So it's not perfect, but that's my goal, is to really not have to as many, really in general, not have any at all. That's the goal, but not have any 20-point blowouts or things like that. Because I think losing games like that just really kill a team's confidence. Losing a game like that can ruin an entire week of games and of practice. And uh, so trying to do that, obviously, as I said earlier, trying to make playoffs, that's always a goal. But really just is out of next season, my main goal is to just establish that new competitive culture, and going out and just having fun. That's part of it too, is just, I mean, uh, basketball and athletics in general, they only last so long. And
Hmm.
so I think making sure that all these high school athletes understand that, and making sure that these 4 years are not all just about winning. A big portion of it is about having fun. But one thing I've told the girls is going out and winning games is fun. you know um, g- Putting in that work and practice and having it pay off during the season is fun.
Hmm.
And so being able to pick and choose, I guess, how or what you consider to be fun, um, that's
Yeah.
another thing that I guess I'm trying to change and establish.
And I think that's it almost sounds like it's a perfect opportunity, coach, for you to have like new players coming in or replacing like other players, because then they're going to be the ones that are like your players. I don't know if that
Yep.
makes sense or not, but they're yours. Like those are your girls that you have now, who in a sense like don't have to relearn anything
Hmm.
necessarily if they're coming from 8th grade. Like they come in and it's your program, and there probably won't be as much of like, oh, like, well, we did it, this way last year or whatever the case may be. It's like, no, like, we're have new people coming in, so here's our fresh slate, and here's how we're going to kind of get after it, sort of thing. Am I right in thinking that?
You are, yeah, and it's really working out, I guess I would say, to my benefit to have such a young core to the team, because as you said, there's not going to be too much of an adjustment in terms of changing what we do. It's just going to be, this is what we do. And um, for some of the players, it might be the only system that they know. And, kind of like I said, it just that works out to my benefit. And as you said, the way I view it is exactly, these younger players, those are my players. And, once they get older, it will really be my team, you know. Um, but even all the players that we have now, they're very quick learners and they're very eager to learn. And so I'm very excited for this next year.
Yeah, no, that's a really good situation to be in when they're eager to learn. It sounds like they handle the transition pretty well, and you kind of stepping in, and they're ready to go. So I'm we talked about you talked about things about the non-negotiables on like the defensive end. So if there were, and again, I'm putting you on the spot here, but if there were like a couple key things where, in terms of like execution, in terms of, maybe that more X's and O's execution, if there's a couple things that you really want to make sure that you get down in terms of either offensive or defensive execution with this new group of players you have coming in, like what would be the ones that you're like, man, if we can like execute this or do this, like I know we're really going to be in a good spot.
I know for a personal goal for mine is to um, play more, matchup defense and just more of a man. But down, we don't always have, the proper team together, with the correct athletes to be able to run that as much as you might like. And so, really, I think a big goal for me is to teach the girls how to be very versatile on defense and being able to play in different defensive sets, um, and being able to play out of position too. Because when you're running back in transition, you're not always going to be able to get to that one spot that you've been practicing every single practice since you started. um, and so being able to really just, I guess, have everyone understand each other's assignments, and for me, a big part, because we run a lot of zone and we ran a lot of zone last year. A big portion of our defense was just on the backside help defense. We fell asleep a lot, and so teaching the players just really how important it is when you're off ball on defense. That's a big goal of mine, is to just make sure that we're always active on defense and awake and paying attention.
So it in that sense, then, are you expecting or anticipating like a bit of a learning curve in terms of like more of like those man-to-man principles? Do you think that that's going to be a tough adjustment? Do you think that they're going to be able to kind of slide in and sort of do that sort of thing? I'm just trying to get a feel of where you feel with that.
Yeah, I do think it can be a tough adjustment. Because I think if you're playing man defense properly, it's very difficult. It takes a lot of conditioning and a lot of knowledge in the game of basketball,
Yeah.
and understanding angles and things like that. So I do think that there's going to be a learning curve, and it's not something that we're looking to be perfect at next year. But the end goal is to be able to fall back into that, especially with teams that we match up well with. Again, as I said, we defense. I didn't say, but defense was actually our strong suit last year. We had a tough time, kind of putting the ball in the hole, but we did a relatively good job with defense and our defensive assignments, and we made some adjustments in the middle of the season, and the girls did terrific with it. They ran with it and started running it practically to perfection. And we are actually prior to switching our defense, we hadn't picked up a win, and then once we switched our defense, we started having some more luck come our way with the win column. But I would say just learning defensive assignments and being aggressive on defense is the biggest.
Hey, I'll say if you have a team that's bought in on the defensive end and they're willing to put in the work, then that probably saves you a lot of time as a coach, that you don't have to get them to buy in on playing defense. Like all right, they want to
Yeah.
play it, they're going to give that effort. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And then conversely, on the other end, in terms of like the offensive end, as you're trying to put in like a new system, are there certain things where you're like, all right, like we got to make sure that we can do this right within the new offensive system that you're putting in? Because I know it's very hard. I know for me as a coach, I want to like be perfect at everything. I want to execute like every single thing. This offense better run perfectly, but realistically, I realize that if I'm putting in something new, that there's got to be certain things I really need to make sure we get down. So I'm curious if there are certain aspects of your offense that you're trying to implement or put in that you're like, oh, we got to make sure we do this right.
Yeah. That I would say more just learning how to correctly read a defense and just let the play develop in front of you. Last year, I think we had a real problem with when we had pressure on us, we would just kind of fall apart. And I think that's an issue that a lot of people run into, especially with younger teams. But being more comfortable under pressure is definitely something that we're going to be working on. And as I said, reading the defense and essentially letting the defense, make the decision for you. And we're really looking to, space things out and just really give players an opportunity to attack the basket and make a play.
And just to add on to that, it seems like as these like new players are going to come in, is there going to be more of like a expectation on like film or things like to kind of like build up their like basketball IQ? Because I find that that's really tricky. At least for me, I've had difficult experiences from time to time trying to get my players basketball IQ up. So I'm almost asking you for ideas at a certain point about what you think that might look like.
Yeah, and one thing I always stress to the players is to just go and watch basketball. Is just watch it as much as possible and just be an avid consumer of basketball. And for us, film is going to be huge, especially because we have so many players returning.
Yeah.
And the defense that we ended up switching to, I helped teach the girls, and so it's something that we're going to be keeping. And so being able to show them film on that, we didn't watch too much film last year during the regular season, and I think that film goes such a long way for their basketball IQ, and just being able to see themselves in those spots and letting them know just exactly where they should be in those moments, or how to read a defense when they do this. I do think that film is a very important aspect of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. I can say things sometimes till they're blue in the face, but sometimes it's just easy for them to just see themselves do it,
Yep.
and that can speak for itself. And then really quickly before we hit our concluding segment, you did bring up something that I did want to make sure that I address here is any expectations that you have for your returning players in terms of what they teach the new players that are coming in. Are there certain things that you are hoping for or are expecting that those varsity players from last year are going to, instill or teach or kind of model for those new players that are going to be filling in?
It's kind of difficult to say, especially because, as we've kind of talked about, I'm really trying to, change the culture and change kind of just how we do things at North Point. So
Yeah.
even, a lot of what we're going to be doing next year, it's different and it's new to the girls who were on varsity last year. But one thing that at least a a good portion of our younger girls, they just brought the right mentality to practice, and they were showing up ready every day to learn and to get better. And so I'm hoping that that rubs off to these players that are going to be coming into the program, because the players who got through last season, they're um, some of the more mentally tough players. I think
Yeah, you had to be
having
last year.
had to be, going through the not only with COVID, but I mean, the season was canceled just a couple weeks before it got started, and then it got started right back up. It was just a roller coaster of emotions this past spring, and I think that was as tough as it was in the moment. I think it's gone a long way in maturing these players and getting them ready for those bigger moments next year.
Yeah, you certainly are correct in the sense of those players who are returning. They learned a lot about perseverance and a lot about, just sticking with it. So, if anything, even by example, I'm sure they could model that to your players about, persevering and all of the lessons that we had to learn for last year. A lot of them the hard way. I know that for sure. No, so that's a great point. Awesome. Well, Coach, to wrap up, there's a couple questions that I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with this first one. Thinking back to your coaching career or even your playing career, if you want to bring that up, what is a moment that you can look back on that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Um, I definitely think it's kind of something that we touched on a little earlier, but I think taking care of things for the summer and making sure that you have a plan together for your program for the summer and executing that plan. It's definitely something that I wish I had taken care of a while ago, and because of that, we've had to push some things back this summer. Um, and I really just wish that I had taken care of it, and I think that you know, uh, making sure that you're prepared for when the summer comes around is huge, because as we've talked about, kind of um, this whole time is just how crucial it is to get the team together during the summer. And so it feels, every day that goes by, every week, it feels like we're losing time, but you know yeah, in the long run, I'm not too worried, because, once we get to, moving at full speed and operating how we want to, that's something that I'm hoping that we can sustain and stay at that
Mhm.
level. And, once you're at that level, I mean, the goal is obviously to never, come down from that. But um, I think taking care of things sooner rather than later is is something huge for coaches.
Yeah, I've been there too, where I've had like a summer come and go, and then fall comes, and I'm like, oh, I should have
Yeah.
probably tried to do more. I could use that time, but then, like you said, like in a sense, like you can kind of get that time back in a way. It's not like it's completely lost, but yeah, I agree. Like you got kind of go for the days in the summer, and you're like, oh, I could be doing stuff, or
Yep.
man, I wish I
Yeah.
was doing something right now. So no, I totally get that. I've been there before for sure. Awesome. And then to wrap up, Coach, what I give every guest is what I call my 60-second soapbox. It's your platform to get out your final thought, closing message, an idea, or something that you want to leave the listener with. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and you can take it away.
Yeah. I was thinking about this, and I guess the biggest thing for me this summer, I think, is all this talk about possibly introducing the shot clock
Oh, yes.
to Arizona basketball in a couple years. And I obviously, we have to wait and see what happens, but I'm extremely excited. I certainly hope that it's something that can be an actual thing. I know it's not going to be necessarily feasible for everyone. That's still, a question, I guess, for some schools. And but I really think that the shot clock would just really um, elevate the level of basketball here in Arizona, and I think it would go a long way for our athletes. just having played with the shot clock, it's really preparing them for the collegiate level. And I think that it could turn Arizona into a big, spot for basketball for recruiting. And I'm really excited. I certainly hope that it's something that can happen.
Yeah, it certainly does feel like it's on its way, and you are definitely not alone in that thought, especially out here in this state when it comes to regards to the shot clock. So that's kind of like the Arizona hot topic, I feel like,
Yep.
when it comes to basketball for sure. So very appropriate to bring that up. That's funny. Awesome. Coach Rivera, I want to thank you for spending some time kind of talking about your program, talking about you kind of stepping up here in the head coaching position, and the idea of replacing key players and what that's going to kind of look like for you next year. So I wish you the best of luck next year. Hopefully, you're able to implement all the things that you need to implement and things go great. So thank you, Coach. Good luck. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Coach. I really appreciate you.
Awesome. And thank you guys so much for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.